afternoon. This is Dr. Lisa Homa. This is week 1 podcast, and the purpose of the podcast, one, we're piloting this, so I'd really love for you to share your feedback with me if you think they're helpful or they're just not helpful. The content that I'll be reviewing is information that is not in your course textbook. We won't have a podcast every week, but when there's a lot of information to cover, I feel like just an audio portion where we can just synthesize a lot of different material to give you a wider perspective of something is helpful, but I want to know what you think about it too. There is a narrated PowerPoint that is going to cover the second half of this, and that is information that is directly from your text. But this information, again, is extra, and from here, I'm going to take it from the beginning of healthcare and healthcare practices through nursing. And so I'm going to cover ancient history in this podcast of the 1700s. It is brutally dry content, so do your best to stay awake, or if you're having trouble sleeping, this might be exactly what you need. So I'm going to make it short and sweet, and we're going to get through as much as we can in a short period of time. So to understand nursing today, we want to walk you through the past, examine religion, caregivers, gender roles, science, and events that interacted to form exactly who our discipline is today. I'm going to take you all the way back to ancient civilizations where healthcare was intertwined with religion. For example, Taoism in 3500 BC. Whew, we're really going back there. They emphasized the balance of life, and caregivers were often focused on driving out demons and restoring balance through the developing technique of acupuncture. I don't know about you, but if you've taken care of some patients lately, you may swear that they have some demons in there that need taken out. But I've taken care of many patients that I swear they had a demon in there. I wish I would have had some acupuncture at the time. Okay, Hinduism emphasized good hygiene and health, and earlier accounts of surgical procedures, which came from the Far East. So to give you some perspective on this, Hinduism is known actually as Eastern medicine. Here in the United States, we are known as Western medicine. And the way we approach it from two different standpoints is completely different. I will say it is completely different. I'm not sure if you have heard of Ayurveda, but Ayurveda is this is exactly the roots from Hinduism. It came from there. It came from Buddhism. It resulted in the development of hospitals outside the home, which were for men only. Don't get me started about the men only focus. Anyway, it focused on hygiene and prevention of diseases. And if you ever get an Ayurveda text, they have them on Amazon. They talk about when you should go to bed. They talk about really the circadian rhythms of the body and how your body functions optimally. It's pretty cool, actually. The advancement of medical knowledge during this ancient time was limited, as many doctors were also religious men with strict rules prohibiting contact with bodily fluid and dead bodies, and yes, women also. As cultures continued to develop around 1500 BC, there's clear documentation that women were engaged in the role of midwifery, providing care to women during childbirth. This was also more developed by the Egyptian culture, where women had a higher status in the culture than all other cultures. Egyptians documented surgical procedures as far back as 1500 BC. The Babylonians focused on astrology, and their healthcare focused on special diets, massage, and again, driving out spirits. We've all had those patients where you think they have evil spirits in them. Anyway, Babylon had strict codes for fees and guidelines for doctors. The Hebrew people carried healthcare practices throughout the regions as they traveled and were very best known for integrating Egyptian sanitary practices with their religion and cementing critical hygiene practices into their culture. The Hebrew culture focused on caring for widows, orphans, and strangers in need, and they performed surgeries such as circumcision, cesareans, and amputations, all which were attributed to the Romans. On to the Greeks. The Greeks were known for religion of ancient gods and their development of medical science. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, focused on the whole person, the mind, body, spirit, and environment, developed the concept of diagnosis by evidence. Again, in nursing, we have developed that concept to mean holism. And that is very important to our program because holistic comfort theory is our theoretical foundation. And we don't look at just the physical sense in the human being. We look at all aspects of their life, the whole entire system. Hippocrates also developed the concept of diagnosis by evidence. So this is where it really started. He was a highly ethical man and attributed to the Hippocratic Oath for doctors, which is still used today. The Romans conquered the Greeks and the Hebrews and assimilated these cultures, and out of this grew a lot of healthcare knowledge. Many ancient civilizations used medicinal herbs for prevention and treatment of disease, but the Romans developed and studied pharmaceuticals. Roman physicians were treating athletes with physical therapy, infections, and meds, and even discovered ailments linked to job-related dangers like lead and mercury. Because the Roman armies were critical to the advancement of the empire, early mobile hospitals that were staffed by both men and women advanced care for troops through sanitation, work care, diets, and comfort. The Romans published the first medical textbooks. It's pretty unbelievable to think what they did during that turn of event. So from here, there was the rise in Christianity around 30 AD, marked a major shift in healthcare. Early Christians who followed teachings of this new religion were compelled to care for the sick, the poor, children, widows, and orphans. Previously, they were outcasted from society and no one cared for the marginalized peoples at all. The key concept that emerged from Christianity was the sanctity of human life, which then caused conflict to the practices of abortion. See, you just thought it was our population here in the 21st century, but nope, it's been happening since the Romans. Also during this time, they practiced infanticide and human sacrifice. Early documents of the religion show the role of women as caregivers. Thus, the Latin nutritius or nutrier means nurse. The majority of care was still within the home, but rudimentary hospitals were places where the marginalized could go for care. The caregivers were men and women alike with no training or education on how to care for the sick. Often these caregivers were the society outcasts themselves. But now we head into a darker time. From 500 to 1000 AD, poverty, plagues, and death took over the world. Diphtheria was the Black Plague, smallpox, leprosy, and other killer diseases were carried from village to village by the increasing movement of people and ironically by the Crusaders attempting to spread Christianity. They not only spread Christianity, but they also took their bugs with them. This was a time of almost no health care. People simply died. Sanitation was non-existent and learning slowed to a snail's pace. But still, monastic orders and nunneries continued to treat the sick with bloodletting, bandaging, cautery, enemas, and leeching. Yes, leeching. The majority of caregivers were compelled to care for others due to their religious beliefs. Military care continued to develop from the Romans through the Crusades. Men primarily, but some women traveled with armies, spreading religion and unfortunately also spreading bugs and disease. As this period advanced, healthcare divided into either religious and secular options, but no education was necessary for men and women caring for others. Now we move on to the Renaissance period. It's typically dated from 14th to the 17th centuries. This time is marked by the intellectual reawakening after the Middle Ages. This intellectual reawakening produced critical developments for healthcare like the microscope, the thermometer, and many areas of study and invention were growing. This is a time where men became philosophers, physicians, lawyers, politicians, and the role of women was relegated to the household or religious orders. Caregiving shifted from men to women, but largely inside the family home or religious institutions, and physical care was secondary to the salvation of the soul. In Catholic nation-states, healthcare remained largely unchanged from the Middle or Dark Ages, but in non-Catholic nation-states, healthcare continued to deteriorate. Poor conditions were expected, and people went to caregiving institutions expecting to die. Now, just to make a note on that, why do you think that is? Sure, what you know about those times, the Catholic Church was the richest church in the world. I think actually it probably still is today. They had all the money and the power at that time, so it makes sense that the care and everything that happened around the Catholic nation state was considerably better than the other areas because they didn't have any money. So then from this time, poor conditions continued and people went to caregiving institutions expecting to die. How terrible is that? The Protestant Reformation further impacted the role of women. Protestant Reformation occurred during King Henry VIII. So during this time, people were leaving the Catholic Church because they also cited abuses noted in the Catholic Church, so moved towards the Protestant religion instead. This further impacted the role of women in society, making them more or less property of men without value or worth. Slowly during this time frame, women exclusively took on the role of caregiving, but the women caring for others were either religious like nuns or deaconesses, or in the secular arena, widows, prostitutes, and orphans. Not exactly exactly the people that you think about or you would want caring for your relatives. It's just the way things started. One of the early nursing orders was the Sisters of Charity, which took over care in many hospitals. The Industrial Revolution of Europe occurred from 1760 to 1840. It witnessed people flooding to the cities of Europe where sanitation, plague, and pestilence grew. Again, everywhere the people traveled, they brought the bugs and disease with them. Also, at the same time as all of the Industrial Revolution was hitting in Europe, people left Europe and came to the Americas. The first permanent settlements in Virginia were established in early 1600. Keep in mind that many of the early settlers were religious refugees fleeing Europe, so healthcare in America looked very much like healthcare in Europe at that time. People were being hung or persecuted. Many Protestants died. They believed that anyone outside of the Catholic religion were like devil worshippers, and so they were hung out in public and made a mockery and shown as a lesson that you don't want to be Protestant. So instead of being killed, they went to the Americas. They thought it was a better thing to do that.